the Stranded J podcast.
Let's start by talking about kind of our background with Daredevil, like with where we got into the character originally and why we're so into it now, because this isn't kind of out of nowhere.
Sure, yeah, that's
so
a good
I'm going
idea.
to start with you.
Oh.
Or no, I'll start. That's okay. I'm the host, right?
Yeah.
And then you can kind of think about what you want to say. Okay. So I'm a big comic book fan, and I love Marvel and I love DC, and I've been following it since I was a little kid. And I got really into Daredevil in high school. I always knew who Daredevil was, and I watched like the Ben Affleck movie when it came out in the 2000s. But I also I got more into him when I was in high school because I started collecting more like of the stuff that I wanted to read, and I was got more interested in stuff. And the first Daredevil thing I ever read that wasn't just a single issue was Daredevil Born Again, which this is by title only. If you've watched the other Daredevil seasons, Daredevil Born Again was kind of told in season 3 on Netflix. That's like the closest you'll get to the story of Daredevil Born Again, the actual comic. But I remember reading that, and I got really into him because he had red hair and he looked kind of like me, and I was really into that. So I thought that was kind of fun. Yeah, so I started collecting him, and I got really into all of his stories and stuff. And something's driving you crazy.
Sorry.
But I got kind of into him from that. And when they announced that they were going to be making a series, I like followed it religiously and like how they were going to do it and stuff. And it was going to be through Netflix. So I watched the first season in like a day. I was in college at the time, and I was like obsessed with it. And so I remember watching it from beginning to end without stopping, both seasons 1 and 2. And I was just so like, I could not stop watching it. Season 3 was kind of delayed because they were like thinking about maybe canceling it for a while, and then they brought it back. So it was a little longer of like a production time. But I remember when that came out, we were dating by then, and we were in Tennessee on a vacation. I remember laying in the bed at night, like during vacation. I watched the first episode and got really into it. And I was slower with that one because we wanted to watch it together. But it's been like 7 years since that series. It got canceled on Netflix, and then they took a lot of time to bring it back for this. And we've been excited ever since. But what I was going to say is, I remember when we met, our first kind of connection was us talking about our love of the show. And so we kind of got into it from that. And so we watched it together. So now it's kind of our thing. I mean, it's like us with Fallout. Daredevil is the same way, where we just kind of have an interest in it. And then I got you into the comics, and Chip Zdarsky's run, which was just a couple of years ago. I was picking up weekly, and I gave it to you to be like, hey, you like Daredevil, read this. And you read the whole thing. So
Yeah.
Daredevil's my favorite Marvel character. It's always kind of tied with Spider-Man, but he always kind of edges out just a little bit more for me. So yeah. Tell me, Tricia, how did you get into Daredevil and like the series and stuff?
I just really like gingers, I think. And I think that a lot of people don't know that Daredevil is a redhead.
Well, because in a lot of versions, he's not.
Right. So for me, I don't even really know how I got into Daredevil. I will say that I was pretty into the CW series, Arrow, when it came out with Stephen Amell, and I really liked that series. And so when Daredevil came out on Netflix, I was like, oh, it's like another Arrow. But like, I didn't have any before I met you, like comic books. I didn't really have any besides Spider-Man that I even was interested in. And when I say interested in, I don't mean the comics Spider-Man. I mean like the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies.
Yeah.
And so I really enjoyed those. And then of course Arrow came out. I thought that was really just the bee's knees. And then when Daredevil came out, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm going to try this out. I really liked the first season. And then the second season came out, and I watched it about halfway through. And so I'm not really the kind of person, and I know that you are, I'm not really the kind of person that sits and I'm going to binge this. I'm just going to watch every single episode and stay up till 4 a.m. to watch the entire season. I'm like, let's watch an episode, go away, cook dinner. Maybe tomorrow we'll watch another episode, and it'll be like a And you could even say that that's technically binging, is watching it every single night. But
Yeah, in a way. That's
Yeah.
kind of what we did with Game of Thrones.
yeah. Yeah, but Game of Thrones, gosh, you could like, it's hard to run out of Game of Thrones. But anyways, so all that to say, I really enjoyed the first season. I watched the second season up until the point, by the way, this is going to have spoilers. But
yeah, in the description, we're going to spoil the crap out of the first 2 episodes. So.
definitely. So if you haven't watched them yet, we can try to go over like our high level, and then we'll warn you when the spoilers come. But I watched it up until the point that the Punisher in season 2 was apprehended, and then I'm like, okay, and then I just kind of fell off, and I didn't mean to. It's just life got really, really busy. I never got back to watching those last half of season 2, and then season 3 we watched together.
Yeah, so because we were kind of trying to rewatch like the Netflix show before this one, and we ran out of time, but we got to like about where you accidentally bowed out in season 2.
Yeah.
And that's when you realized that you didn't finish season 2, but we did watch season 3. And so we are still kind of watching the Netflix ones too, as we're watching this one. Cause
Right.
I've seen the first season like a million times, and I've seen the second season a couple times. And then the third season I've only seen once. And so I'm excited to get back into some of those and kind of see how they've aged. And I mean, I think from what we've seen so far, they age really well.
Which, to be fair, I mean, the season 2 to season 3, I feel like a lot of people could forget that they didn't watch the other half of season 2, because season 2 it has like a very neat ending. I feel like halfway through this season,
it like splits into 2 stories.
and then the other half of that is the fact that season 3 picks up so much later, where they had those a couple of years in between when they filmed those 2. And so season 3, it's still chronological, but the way that Netflix operated back then is they were like, oh, okay, we're going to come out with, what was that other series that Daredevil was in with Jessica Jones? And
Defenders.
The Defenders.
Yeah.
And so it's like you almost had to watch the Defenders in order to know what was going on in season 3. And it was their way to entice you to watch all of the series, all of them. And so I would have been confused no matter what, because I never watched Defenders. I watched the first season of Jessica Jones, I think the second as well, and I really liked that series. It's just, again, life got busy, and I never watched Luke Cage.
Right. I actually haven't seen Luke Cage or Iron Fist.
Same.
And we've seen seasons. I think we've seen the first 2 seasons of Jessica Jones. Did they do a 3rd season? I can't remember, but
I don't think so. Because we were super bummed when it got canceled.
yeah, and I just. It's the same thing as like the Marvel stuff, because they were trying to do the same thing. They were doing the street level characters, and then they were doing the high level like cosmic and all that, where they were doing the Avengers. And even though at one point they weren't a part of the MCU, another point they were, and now they are again. But when those were coming out, they were kind of like detached from the MCU, but they still had the same continuity. So like in the first season of Daredevil, the whole kind of arc of that season is that Fisk is coming in to kind of rebuild the city after the Battle of New York from the original Avengers, but they just make it really low key, and they call it like the incident or something like that to make it like it's not even like the alien invasion. And so that was kind of like their way of connecting it. And so then like the Defenders, they're like, well, we're going to do the same thing with they did with the Avengers, where, we had each individual movie and then we bring them together for the Avengers. This one, they were like, we're going to do Daredevil, then Jessica Jones, then
Right.
Luke Cage and Iron Fist, then we're going to do the Defenders, and it's going to cross it all over. However, they weren't as well received, and they were a little more like kind of all over the place. And so like Daredevil was like the strongest, and Jessica Jones, and it kind of went in that order. And the Defenders had so much to do with season 3 of Daredevil, even though you could watch season 3 and you'd still kind of just go, oh, I guess he got into some incident that led to him, getting hurt. But yeah, so it was kind of odd in that way. But everybody loved Daredevil so much, and they just tried so hard to cancel it. And then finally the MCU kind of got the rights back to Daredevil fully, and it wasn't through Netflix. And they that's when you saw Charlie Cox in Spider-Man No Way Home for just a quick scene, which was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Then they brought him into She-Hulk, and they brought him into Echo for like a scene. I have not seen those. I've only seen the scenes with him in them. I've watched the first episode of She-Hulk. We'll get into that a little bit, but like with Marvel, it's just so crazy now that it's like really hard to watch everything, especially now that they have TV shows and stuff. And I think they're trying to kind of stray away from overburdening people with their time and like because you literally
After they've already been like, oh, drink from this water hose, and then they realize they killed everybody, and then they're like, actually, we'll take it a little slower.
They're like, oh, we should probably not have so much going on at once. But Daredevil Born Again is something that's been a long time coming. And it's funny that they're calling it Daredevil Born Again. It's kind of like Spider-Man No Home, because the subtitle has nothing to do with, like I said, the story of Born Again. If you want to know what the story of Born Again is, the closest you're going to get in live action is season 3 on the Netflix series.
Can I ask you, as a comic book guy first, does that bother you that they named it Born Again? Because it makes sense that they wanted to name it Born Again because it's coming from the Netflix series and now it's on Disney Plus, and so I get where they were like, oh, that's such a good title, but from your point of view, are you like, don't call it Born Again unless it's the story of, it's kind of like The Killing Joke, like if they were to take that from Batman and then make it something just because they liked the name of it, would that bother you?
I think it would bother me more if they didn't try to do the series, like they didn't try to do Born Again in season 3. So like if season 1 through 3 had nothing to do with Born Again, and then they called season 4 Born Again, like they have, it's technically season 4. And then they had nothing to do with Born Again, then I'd be a little upset, because it's like you're just using the hype of that story. But they did try it already. So I think what their idea was kind of like with Spider-Man Homecoming. It's kind of a double play on the subtitle, where it's like Homecoming because the MCU has Spider-Man and he's coming home to Marvel, as opposed to being owned by Sony. That's a whole other thing we'll get into another time.
So it sounds like Disney does that a lot.
Yeah. And so I think they did Born Again to be like, he's reborn as a series, because it's the series everybody's been waiting for again. And now we're doing it, on Disney Plus, and he's back after 7 years and he's born again. And the story I can tell it's going to be kind of a similar concept, but not the story, where it's like, this is Matt having to kind of restart as a character and bring him back born again into his life that you remember as Daredevil.
Sure.
So yeah. But let's move on. We'll move on to the actual series now. So this is 2 episodes premiered on Tuesday, and we didn't get to watch it until Wednesday. But with all the stuff we've talked about, how much we love the Netflix series, how excited we've been, how we've been kind of building for this.
Because I mean, Matt Murdock, Daredevil, is both of our favorite.
Yeah.
Our favorite Marvel character.
Right.
So we were very excited for this new series. And the other thing is, we were huge fans of Charlie Cox. So
and Vincent D'Onofrio is Kingpin, and
absolutely,
that series just did such a good job of bringing the feel of the Daredevil comics to the show. Like, it was like this kind of noir, like dark, gritty, grimy, seriously like taken story, and and that was great. Like, that's what I think the best version of Daredevil. I mean, you get a lot of disclaimer, you do get a lot of different versions of Daredevil in the comics. Like, you do get like a swashbuckly type of Daredevil that's more like fun, and he's always a poon hound. Like, I'm just gonna be honest. In every version, he's a poon hound, but he may be in like a chivalrous way, or he may be in like a
Jay. What is a chivalrous poon hound?
He just makes women fall for him because of how charming he is, and that's in both versions. But it depends on, is he depressed and charming, or is he having a good time and charming? And that's where you run into different arcs of the character, which I'll get into a little bit later. But we were really excited, and I wanted to know, Tricia, what did you think of the first 2 episodes?
I think, like, just from a top level.
Yeah, without any spoilers. We'll get into spoilers in a little bit.
Ooh, that's gonna be hard. From a top level, it was very, very smart of Disney to release 2 episodes of it, because the first episode made me want the series to never be revamped. Like, halfway through the first episode, I remember just sitting there going, they never should have brought this series back, because at least then they would have ruined a brand new series of their own, and I could disassociate the two and it would be perfectly fine. But the first episode was rough for me. And the second episode, I was sitting there thinking, okay, every new series has to get its legs, right? They have to build their sea legs. So I was like, let's keep watching for episode 2. And we watched them both in the same night.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you could have convinced me to sit back down the next night and watch the second episode based on the first
There
one.
was no way I wasn't going to watch both, regardless of how I felt about them. I was like, I got to watch both.
Right. But for me, the second episode, once it got back into it, I was like, okay. And they introduced a bunch of characters right off the bat. It was like drinking from a fire hose, where I'm like, am I supposed to know who this person is? Because they were acting, like in the first 5 minutes, they were acting like they probably introduced 7 characters, but didn't introduce them by name, just focused on them and then went and panned to the next person and the next person. And so it was really hard to follow, like, who am I supposed to know? Who am I not supposed to know? Is this character even going to be relevant? And it was just all of that right in your face, way too fast. Like, if the last season of Game of Thrones was too fast for you, then this is just, I mean, like, it could have broken your neck with how fast it went. Now, the second episode felt much more Daredevil, and it gave me a lot of hope. It felt a lot more like the original series. I wouldn't say it was on par with it yet, but the ending of the second episode, I was like, okay, cool, I'm here. I'm definitely going to watch again. So the second episode was much, much better than the first. So I'm glad that they released it together.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I was kind of in the same boat as you. Like, I still am. I think that we'll get more into detail, like I said, here shortly. We're both kind of purposefully avoiding some spoilers, but
when we're ready, I'm so ready.
The first episode was a mess, and a lot of people had a lot of people had a lot of fun with it, from what I've seen. And I will say that second watch was easier to digest. I think one of the reasons that I had such a hard time with it, and I would have guessed you had a similar feeling, is we have been, like I said, watching the Netflix show. And when you go from watching like 4 or 5 episodes of that show in a row and then into this, it's not the same. Like whether you agree that it's better or worse is not really the point. It's not the same. It feels to me like kind of a cheap mimic. For others, they feel like it's an approach that is just different but has the same feel. There's an action scene at the beginning that it's in breakneck speed, and I wasn't even settled into my seat yet before a lot of people thought that was a way to go. It was like, that's the way to kind of hit people with like all of this stuff. And for me, I personally felt like it was too much right at the beginning because I missed so much of it. So the second time I watched it, it was a little easier to digest because I knew what happened, and I was able to kind of look at the details, and it smoothed it out for me in a way that when I first saw it, I was just so taken back by how much they used CG to get a point across of that action sequence. Like, Daredevil on Netflix was known for its practical use of action, and it's like, they just use like crazy cool, like atmospheric lighting, and the fight scenes are well choreographed. You can tell they spent months kind of organizing how they're going to do it, whether it's the actors doing it or the camera doing it. And so it was just so impressive to watch when it happened, because you're like, dang, there are some tricks they're doing here to make it, smoother, but it's not just like a CG fest. And that fight scene at the beginning of Born Again was just it took me out of it so fast the first time I watched it, because everything utilized like a CG filter or CG actors or a CG use of the camera, or a lot of stuff in the first episode felt like an obvious set. And that was really hard. Like, cause like watching the Netflix show, it did feel like even when they were on a set, it felt like a real place too. Like it felt like everything was real.
Well, and they didn't have the budget on the Ironically, on the Netflix set, they didn't have the budget to do all this crazy CG action flying through the sky, using like a grappling hook, etc. Type of action. And so they had to rely on real action choreographed fight scenes. And I think that Disney just proved that is the way to go, that maybe taking a little bit more time and not throwing CG at it. What I had said to Jay when we initially, because we were trying to like not tell each other so that it would be fresh for this, but sometimes you can't help it.
I couldn't hold it in, some of my thoughts, in positive ways and in negative ways.
Mine's mostly negative, but I'm a tough sell.
You are.
But that being said, it reminded me of, because my other favorite Marvel character, I feel like I have three. I have Spider-Man, Daredevil's top, and then Spider-Man and Doctor Strange are kind of neck and neck. Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, it has that exact same vibe of that first fight scene where you're like, oh, this is bad CG. Like you could tell it was kind of rushed, and they were just like, get it done, and throw as much money at it as you want to, but just get it done, because we're Disney and we're infallible. That same sinking feeling that I had sitting in the theater watching Multiverse of Madness, I had watching this first episode of Daredevil Born Again.
Yeah. So last night I went with my friend Tony, who was on the podcast, from the Rook Room. We went and saw Captain America: Brave New World, and it took us forever to see it just because of schedules, but we went and saw it last night. And he hasn't seen Born Again yet. He's doing the same thing we're doing. He was watching through the Netflix show before he finishes the new one.
But we're impatient.
Yeah, I was I had to watch it. I had to. I mean, it's Daredevil. I had to watch it. But he kind of was wondering what my thoughts were, like without spoiling it, kind of like we're doing now. And I said, the end of that movie, there's a kind of a big CG. The movies that really with Marvel are doing it where, you can tell they've had to splice and like crunch, and they've come up with new ways to make the movie in their eyes better. After they've done their initial like production on the movie. So they kind of come in and like polish it with this weird Marvel Disney sheen of CG that just makes everything look uncanny. And the end of the movie, I'm not going to spoil that movie for you either, but at the end of that movie, there's like a moment where the action's done and it's kind of just the aftermath, and they're standing in the aftermath. And I talked to Tony afterwards, and I said, that scene at the end, how they're all kind of just standing around, but everything doesn't look real. And it's like that weird Marvel film. And he was like, yeah. I was like, that is what you see on Daredevil. Like, at least in the first episode, and especially in the first action scene, it just has this sheen of this, your eye can tell it's not real. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of how I felt about that. After I was able to watch it a second time with especially the first scene, I was kind of like, I'm seeing the details and the effort being put into it. And it felt a little bit more like, okay, I see the real parts now, and the fake parts you can tell they did at the end to kind of make it better, and it made it worse. Yeah, so that's kind of like, yes. So I felt that way about the first episode. The second episode, as it progressed, it got more and more like Daredevil.
Agreed.
Like, as it went through. And then there's a scene at the end of the second episode. It's literally the last scene, and it's like the last action scene, which there's not a lot of action in the first two episodes. That I was like, that is what I wanted. Like, that's the Daredevil. That's the Matt Murdock I was looking for. And like, that's exactly what I think we're wanting. So it got me like right at the end. I was like, okay, now I'm ready for episode 3 next week. Mm-hmm. Okay. So we're going to go into spoilers a little bit, but I'm not gonna jump into them right yet. I wanted to kind of give a little bit of context, because there's an elephant in the room with this show that we haven't discussed yet, and that is production issues. We kind of talked about why, it's been like 7 years since season 3, and they have been working on this since, pretty much. And it took a long time. Some of it was the writer's strike. Some of it was was COVID a little bit. And then a lot of it was a complete rehaul of the entire series, basically. So I did some research because I knew some of this, but I didn't know it as much. And so that also kind of, it's not excuses for how this ended up, but it's also, it helped me kind of process. I think it gives me positive hope for this show. So this show dealt with the writer strike and reshoots. It was originally supposed to be 18 episodes for season 1. Only 9 were filmed. And from what everyone has said, it was like a crime. It was a lawyer drama that had no, like, so Foggy and Karen got killed at the beginning and off screen, and they don't talk about it. And Matt shows up with a whole new cast of characters, and it wasn't tied into the Netflix series. It was just the same actors. So a lot of the canon from the Netflix show didn't count. And then the episodes, each episode was a different lawyer situation. So like he had dealt with a different case, and you didn't see him in the Daredevil suit until like episode 9 or 10. And it didn't quite have, and it bothered not only actors, but it bothered the studio. So Kevin Feige, who is in charge of the MCU since Iron Man, saw what they were doing and basically halted it and was like, this is not good. And like, this needs to be fixed. And in Disney budget fashion, they went, well, we don't have time to completely just start from scratch. And they kind of told people that. They kind of told people that's what they were doing. But you get the impression that they definitely took a lot from what they had already filmed and put it into this now. But he basically said, we need to try this again. So only 9 of the episodes were filmed. 6 of them were reshot and kind of fixed up. So they took what they had already filmed and kind of just added stuff here and there, maybe added some CG, maybe added some like one little character moment. And then 3 episodes of those were newly shot. So they didn't completely from like the 9 episodes completely ground up, like just reshoot all of them. They said you have 3 episodes that they brought in brand new writers. They fired everybody. They brought in brand new writers. And then those writers said, we're going to take it and we're going to go from the Netflix series and continue it that way, which made the actors happier. And they said, we're going to take these 3 episodes to kind of give us what we want. And then we're going to take what has already been filmed and we're going to kind of try to tone it into something different.
That must have been really difficult.
Yes.
Like from a writing standpoint, that would have been
and
so awful. But that also means, because it has been renewed for a season 2 already.
That's what I was going to say. So season 2 is not really a season 2. It is, but it isn't, because there's only 9 episodes coming out for season 1 and there were supposed to be 18. And the other 9 are coming out as a season 2, but those are from the ground up. Those are completely going to be whatever intention these new writers have is going to be shown 100%. So whatever you criticize in season 2 is the new writer's fault. Whatever you criticize in season 1, maybe some of it, but a lot of it can be from what has already been a mess.
That it's like they were trying to pick up puzzle pieces and fit them into.
And they were like, we have a certain angle we want to approach with this, which is the angle they've talked about in interviews, which is like the Netflix show. They said that's what worked. That's what we want to do. But when they went in and they saw basically what had been filmed already, they went, this is not at all like the Netflix show. It's literally the antithesis, because they don't even want it to continue on that story. So we're going to try to just make it work, and you can see it. And after getting more of that context, like I said, I knew some of that, but I didn't know it that detailed. After getting that context and watching the first 2 episodes, I feel a little bit better, because you can literally see each scene that was already shot and which scene wasn't, and they added it in. And so that first action sequence was added after, and they didn't have the budget or the time, and they wanted to emphasize that they wanted to get Daredevil in the costume, and they had to bring in the old characters and kind of get the story progressing the way they wanted it to. Like I said, that's not necessarily an excuse for how it was executed, but I would guess that they filmed it with a certain intention on paper, and then Disney producers crunched it and said, we can't push this date anymore. We need it done by this time. And their hands were tied, and this is where they're at. And the only reason I say that too is because of the scene at the end of episode 2, which felt more like what we saw. So we're going to get into spoilers now that we have that context, because now I don't think there's anything else we can talk about without spoiling it. And this is heavy spoilers. I mean, like, and I will say, we talked about it a little bit at the beginning. There's like breakneck speeds of like really like everything, like basically the entire plot of this season happens in the first 5 minutes. So,
And we're not, sorry, I just need to know. I need you to tell me, are we holding back? Are we being nice?
no.
Okay.
No, you
great.
say whatever you want to say. I mean, I feel like it'll be.
I'm going to say it.
I said this before. I think I said this when we finished watching it. I think it's going to be a little bit of good cop, bad cop. I do think I'm going to be a little more empathetic towards it because of my love for the character and kind of the intentions I can see. But it's not excuses as like, it's good because I love the character. It's more of, I'll get into it, but reading more of the comics, unfortunately, than you. I'm not trying to like brag.
I've read more of the comics than you.
You have a certain tone in your head.
Sure, that's fair.
That's my favorite tone of Daredevil, but there's multiple tones, and I can tell that they're kind of stuck in tones. Like,
for everyone that's wondering, I haven't read Born Again, but it doesn't seem to matter because it's Born Again in name only. I have only read the Chip Zdarsky run, which is one of the later ones. So yeah, it's one of the most recent.
It's the run that happened just before the one that's going on right now. Mm-hmm. So it's just a few years old. So the big scene we're talking about, just to get it out there before we criticize it, is basically so Matt and Karen and Foggy are in it. Obviously, Karen and Foggy were added later on to tie in because, like I said, they were intentionally going to kill them and not even talk about it. But Matt and Karen Foggy are at Josie's bar from the original Netflix series, having a good time. Foggy essentially gets I'm not gonna break down the whole series or the whole episode, but just this beginning part, just so you guys get some context. They're at the bar. Basically, Foggy gets a call. There's a guy he's covering for. They have the Nelson Murdoch and Page law firm, which happened at the end of season 3, and he gets a call from one of his guys that he's helping and as the defense attorney, and he basically it's like a whole distraction. Bullseye from season 3 is back, who almost died in season 3. He's out for revenge on Matt and his friends for what happened in season 3, and he essentially is on the Foggy's on the phone, Karen's out there with him, and Matt is distracted by another situation that he's hearing, so he starts running another direction and realizes that it's a distraction and diversion as Bullseye shoots Foggy right in the chest. And Karen told him, and then so there's this scene that on paper sounds so epic. It's basically Matt as Daredevil in his costume fighting Bullseye in a costume. And it's like going through the entire Josie's bar up to the roof. And they're having this crazy fight scene up to the top. Foggy dies. And Matt hears Foggy die through his heartbeat and everything. And Karen's upset. And Matt loses his crap and throws him off the building. He throws Bullseye off the building. And Bullseye lands, splat. You think he dies, and then he wakes up. And then Matt is basically broken. And... yeah. It's kind of like Avengers Endgame, where then you skip to 1 year later. 1 year later, everything's different. I mean, you have different characters. You have different motivations. Matt's not in Hell's Kitchen anymore. It's a little bit lighter. There's jokes and there's all this stuff. And that's kind of where you set the scene for the first episode and the series. So now I'll let Tricia let her thoughts out of at least that scene first as we talk about it, but we can go all over the place if you want.
So when I said that episode 1 starts drinking from a fire hose, like Jay said, I'm sure that Disney was like, we are gonna start this so epic and it's gonna be huge, and it's better to start on a high note than to not have to work up to it, which I do to a point agree with. But it was just done so wrong in so many ways. You walk into Josie's bar. Actually, I don't even think you walk in. I think it starts in Josie's bar. And it's one of those perfect Netflix kind of one-shots where it's like going all around following this fight scene. But before that, we're in the bar and there are like 4 different conversations being had at the same time. So you have Matt and Karen sitting at one table, Foggy and this new woman that's also a lawyer that was not in the original series.
Former DA, I think is what she says.
Yep. And then you have 2 people sitting at the bar that were like
They're cops.
I don't even know. I was gonna say I don't. Are they feds?
I
Are they
didn't pick up
cops?
on that either because it was really like it went so fast. I mean, like, and they
like were overlapping.
Yeah, and they were kind of going back and forth between these conversations of all these different characters. So yeah, they were cops. I think because the other guy is now a retired cop who is working at the law firm that Matt is now working at.
Yeah, so he's like on the brink of retirement, and his partner is asking him like, "Are you sure you want to retire?" I'm like, I have no interest in these two characters because I don't know who they are, so I don't care about their conversation. And then I don't really care about the conversation with Foggy and the old DA. And she's like, "Oh, let me."
Well, he's just kind of hitting on her, and Foggy's being Foggy, which is fun, but in a context of how fast everybody else's conversations are going, it's like.
And then you switch over to Karen and Matt, who are sitting at a table watching Foggy hit on this girl, and they're having a conversation about how bad his game is, which is fine because those are the only two. That's the only conversation that's taking place between characters that you know. But they're talking about a character that you don't know. So, like, I don't care.
Yeah.
I didn't care about any of the things that were happening. And it was just very ADHD, where it was like, to this conversation, to this one. Then you're talking to Josie, and then Josie's cracking a joke. And it was just too much. And then all of a sudden, Foggy gets a call. And he goes outside to the bar, and Matt's listening. And that's the other thing. They used that way too much. In the first and the second season, or the first and the second episode, where Matt is listening in on everything around him, where it was like this conversation, then I'm listening to this heartbeat, and then I'm listening to this, this phone call. Like I can now hear the phone call and
footsteps,
everything.
Footsteps a lot, yeah.
And so,
and like we know that's his parent, like that's a power he has,
of course. But it was never. I felt like it was just really overdone immediately. But anyways, so then he gets this phone call, and I guess that Foggy has been harboring someone, essentially, that he wants to get into witness protection.
Yeah, he's he's hiding him and keeping him safe in his apartment. And so Matt and Karen walk out, and they're like, "Wait, you have him?" He's like, "Yeah, he's just in my apartment. He's safe. I wanted him to stay safe because of this and this." And like, "Why didn't you tell me?" And I will get to that here in a minute. But he's like, "Why didn't you tell me?" And he's like, I whatever. Like he has an explanation. And then Matt suits up and goes in that direction because the guy on the phone's getting attacked. He says, he's like, "I'm getting."
Right. He's like really paranoid, and he's like, "Someone's at the door."
Mm-hmm. And so Matt goes to see, and as he gets like halfway there, you have this. That's the other thing that like there's this scene, like the reveal of him in his costume is kind of botched because it's really. There's a theme that's in this too that you don't get in the Netflix show. That is this really corny reveal of everything. Everything has like a swell of really like of the theme or music in a corny way. And they use kind of crappy CG that pops in to reveal it. And so it just doesn't work. So it looks cool. Like I have to admit, like if you took a screenshot of him sitting on the scaffolding in his suit, I think it looks pretty good. But him flipping into the scaffolding and standing there and then grappling away looks really corny. Like it looks because of the CG's kind of a miss. And I think that the swell of the music's wrong. It's a little too like 1960s superhero for the Daredevil they're trying to bring back.
Right. Well, and the other thing that annoyed me about it is that then the reason that Matt turns around and goes back to Foggy is the guy's like on the phone. So like, let's just get this straight. Matt is now blocks away from Foggy, blocks away because he's headed towards this other guy at Foggy's apartment. And he hears him on the phone where Foggy is going, "The guy wanted to know where you were. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I had to tell him." And so Matt goes, "Oh, shoot, I need to turn around." And it's like, okay, I get that he has those powers, but like from blocks away, they never had that.
I thought he had like the phone call in his earpiece, in his cowl or something when I first heard it, because it was a little like, is this like a radio relay? Because Matt has a really impressive hearing. And he can hear everything in the city if he wanted to. But that's a little like Superman hearing. Like that's...
Right.
That felt a little convoluted to just get him to get distracted to go back.
Yeah. So I didn't love that. He goes back. Foggy has already been shot. Now, that was pretty cool. I will say when Foggy got shot, and Karen's reaction to it, it was actually pretty cool.
Well, one thing we can get into later, or we can talk about another time, is you don't love Deborah Ann Wool as Karen.
I think that's an understatement.
Like, you hate her in the Netflix show. Like, you hate her acting choices, her tics, her character, like her delivery of a lot of the lines. And one thing that you will disagree with me on, but one thing that I felt with Karen, because she's not in much of this, is she's matured in her acting a little bit. And
I agree with that.
I thought in the scenes that she was in this were actually pretty strong. She had way more of a grounded delivery than she did in this kind of mousy, heavy breathing and every response.
Oh my God.
Way.
She was so bad at that. Every single scene she was in the Netflix show, it was like,
hi, Nighthawks.
it was like, sorry if you hear the tip taps, our dog just came down. But every scene she was in the original series, guys, I know that this is, like, I am in the minority here. I know that people love Deborah Ann Wool and they loved how she portrayed Karen. I am not one of those people. Every scene, it would be like, because we were rewatching it in the first season, she would be like, I think someone had been like, your girl's a badass over there. And then she was like, her line was, you have no idea. That was the line. And she decided to go, you have no idea. You have no idea. And it's like, what are you doing? Just say, like, can you be confident in anything? And like, her character is a badass. And she's so, like, all of her lines, she was written like a badass. And Deborah Ann Wool took that character and she's like, you know what this needs? 6 beats and then a shuddery breath. Well, I am not just a secretary. Like, but in this series, you're right. She wasn't in it that much.
And what I did see, she was way more like, hi, Jared. She was way more like, just like they're at Josie's bar and she's just kind of hanging back and they're joking back and forth and the banter's more natural, which is funny because in this show, I think the writing's it's poor compared to the Netflix show as well. So far. It's a little rough. And that might be from the choppiness of the execution, but it was a little like, it just felt like she was like more comfortable as the character. And when she talks, it's way more natural. She has a little more of a lower bass to her voice. She's a little more like she has a little more of the cynicism in her, which is good for that character. And it was just, I thought it was better. But what we were talking about too is so Karen's out there and Foggy gets shot. Matt runs back and they get into this fight, and it's in any like I said, on paper it's cool because it's like, well, he throws a smoke bomb into Josie's bar. There's it's kind of one of those single take kind of looks. It's not a single take. I mean, they had to edit the crap out of it to make it work, but
and it looked so flat because of how they shot it.
They put this film on it. It's someone said it best on Twitter that I saw, which was it felt like they took a film that like a film grain that someone made that is inspired by the Netflix series and put it over like a digital shot of the show, and just like that's what they did to make it seem darker.
Yeah, I think I know the difference. So just because we'd watched it so recently, those big epic scenes and I'm not a cinematographer. I'm very much not that. But from what I noticed, every single one of those scenes in the Netflix series happened down a narrow, long hallway. So you had the camera on a dolly rig that they could pull backwards as the fight scene's happening. You know, they get thrown into a room. Maybe it turns and follows them into the room. Maybe it doesn't. And it just waits for them to blast through the door again. And then it continues down the hallway with this dolly rig. The problem with Josie's bar is that it's a big, wide open space. It's a bar. And so they did kind of try to go from the front door to the back door, but the whole scene was just a little too flat and there wasn't a lot of pullback.
Well, I think what they should have done probably, and I'm not a filmmaker here, so don't give me shit for this, but I do think what would have made it look better, and like you said in what they did in the Netflix series, is you can do Josie's bar. You needed to be much tighter in on them while they're fighting.
Yeah.
So you have like, it's more like half of each of them, and it's kind of going back and forth between them fighting, and you're seeing the stuff that they show kind of as they pan through it all. So as they're fighting in this, the worst part about it for me was when I think it's Matt who knocks the lights out in the
Yeah.
bar, because he does that because he doesn't need to see to be able to fight someone, which is a benefit for him. He knocks the lights out, but instead of it, you could do so many different ways to show that. You could have, it knock out a light, and then you have one small floodlight, like at the bar when it's closing time. You could have moonlit, even if it doesn't make sense. You could have, whatever. You could have it dark and just the flashes of sparks while they're fighting, anything like that. But instead, they decided to do he knocks the light out, and there's obviously still light on set. And instead of making it look darker or seem darker, they just put a blue filter over it with smoke. And that's like the cheapest shot.
It looks so bad.
That's the first, I remember verbally telling you that, like, that looks bad. Like, cause it's just this blue section, and they're fighting, and then they kind of close these doors that have like a frosted glass look, and you kind of see the flashes. All of those intentions are really good.
Right.
And so that backs up, and then they go up the stairway to the roof, essentially. So the whole fight goes all the way through up to the top of the roof, and all of that sounds great. But then you get to, like, say, the top of the roof, and the top of the roof, they are full on CG characters.
I was gonna say the CG hits, and it's just,
and you can tell because Matt,
bad.
it's a big, yet again, it's not in tight on him, and it zooms into the top of the roof, and Matt is like kicking bullseye and stuff, and he's floaty and he's fake, and then it kind of zooms, and it is impressive because then they zoom back in and they are real again, but by that point it's over and it's cheap.
Yeah.
And all of this, mind you,
Yeah.
happens so fast. Like,
Yeah.
you're 5 minutes into the show at that point, I think. Like,
I know.
It's-
I feel bad because we've only been talking about this fight and the bar scene and Foggy dying. I swear to you, that is the first 5 minutes. So you get introduced to all of those new characters.
5 or 10 at most.
I would not even say it was not in double digits. There's no way.
Yeah.
So yeah, all of that happens so fast. So you're just trying to
Because it's
soak
the cold
all of this
open.
in.
It's the title hasn't even come up yet. Like, the new
Right.
title sequence. It's before all that.
Yeah, it was just it was a miss in every. It's so, like, you have this character that you have known and loved, and if you
Thanks,
are,
Jared. Thanks, Nighthawks.
if you're
it's good to see you
reading-
guys.
it's good to see you guys. That's the opening, yes. And if you are, I agree, Jared. It was really cool to see Matt Murdock show up in Spider-Man. I thought that was really fun, and it was also so hopeful for Daredevil characters because, it was like their first taste into.
And it was a confirmation that Matt Murdock is still played by Charlie Cox. Which made me happy. Actually, hold your thought, because there's one that I want to make sure I
That's
don't.
good. My thought's gone.
There's something I want to think about when you talk about Spider-Man No Way Home. Is the thing I love most about that scene is it's very quick, but he is playing Netflix Matt Murdock. Like, it's just he's talking to Spider-Man and Foggy, or Peter
Yeah.
and Foggy and Aunt May, and it's so cool to see that character with that tonality and that approach to the character with new characters that you've seen in other stuff. But the problem with this show that yet again gets into the choppiness of the production is you can tell Charlie Cox, when it first started filming, they said, this is different. This isn't what you were doing on Netflix. This is different characters, a different tonality. This is a different kind of beat we want to hit. So he had to move how he does that character a little bit to make it fit what they wanted. And it's kind of light. It's a little bit more jokey. It's kind of like it was in She-Hulk from what I saw. Like, he's a little more jokey Matt Murdock, which fits the comics in some versions. But it's like if you took Chip Zdarsky or Brian Michael Bendis's run, and one issue he is how he is in that, and then in the next issue he's Mark Waid's run, which is a completely different type of Daredevil.
Not my Murdoch.
I know only like one with Spider-Man and Doctor Strange with the little lizard. That's all I know. What about the?
I'm trying to think of who the lizard doctor is in Spider-Man. I didn't know he.
Kurt Connors.
I didn't know he appeared in Doctor Strange.
No, they only have 2. So they had a 2-episode premiere, and then it's going to be weekly on Tuesdays for a while for this version, which I kind of like. You can make it fun each week. You can have something to look forward to. But
Yeah.
I just wish it was stronger at the beginning. But essentially, though, he did have the same Matt Murdock, but in this one you can just tell he was like, okay, well, I got to approach this, and then they reshot it, and they were like, okay, now you're Netflix Matt Murdock that you've been doing for like 10 years now, over 10 years. And so you can approach it that way, and you can see it especially in episode 1, you can see like one scene as a reshoot, one scene as the original, one scene as a reshoot, because it's like you have him, his ambitions are different. He's broken because of the death of Foggy, and he is like completely trying to restart his life, but also kind of keep all of these internal frustrations with himself. And he, mind you, he says, I'm done being Daredevil essentially at the end of that cold open. He's done. Yeah, you're good. He basically like quits being Daredevil for a year. And so it's him like, I'm done. We're leaving it to the cops. I kind of crossed a line by throwing Bullseye off the roof. And so he has that kind of motivation in the reshoot version. And then in the old version, he doesn't have that because the intention was there's none of these characters that existed. And I think he did have a little bit of the motivation because I think the idea was that Karen and Foggy died off screen, but you don't see it. And so he's a little more happy-go-lucky. And so it's like really off. Second episode's much better. Didn't Ben Affleck play Daredevil like 100 years ago? Yeah, we were talking about that. Yeah, he played Daredevil in the movie in 2004, where it had a lot of like, I think it had like a lot of Nickelback and Creed playing in it, and it was very early 2000s superhero movie where they kind of did like a Spider-Man ripoff. I actually don't hate that movie. It's actually kind of a fun, like if you want to like go get a blast from the past with like all of the different. Like it definitely is an era, like in a different era with how it was filmed and acted and stuff. But that's actually one of the shows or movies that got me into Daredevil. So I got to give it credit for that. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, that's like my big issue with that whole thing is how like he's just Charlie Cox is working his butt off, and I think he does a great job in every scene he's in. But he's playing two different versions of Matt Murdock, and it's hard to, especially in that first episode, keep track of what he's doing because he's really like, I don't know, it didn't work for me as much as it should have. But yet again, that's a testament to what they're going to do hopefully in the second season. One thing I wanted to acknowledge, and I'm going to wait for Tricia for some of it, is like I was kind of alluding to before spoilers, is there's the final scene of episode 2, which is literally the last scene you can watch right now. And it's basically there's a whole kind of arc. You can tell yet again that they had an arc in the original version of this kind of lawyer drama where there is an old character, White Tiger, who he's basically needs to be defended by Matt, and they get into this whole hijinks where he's in his apartment, or he's tracing down the guy that White Tiger was trying to save that ended up killing a corrupt cop. And he basically gets to this apartment and he finds the guy, and he can hear that the people are coming to kill him essentially and say like, hey, you know, they're going to come kill you. You need to go away, go down the scaffolding. And he's the only one in the apartment. And the guys come in and they kind of rough him up, and he's not Daredevil anymore. He doesn't want to do that anymore. And it's the best scene because they kind of beat him up and they punch him and stuff. And he's like, I'm handicapped and stuff. And the guy's like, I don't care. And then they put a gun up to his head and he's like, please don't do this. Please don't do this. No, I can't do that. And you think, some people think he's, you know, you can take it both ways, or you can think of it as he's talking to those guys, which he kind of is, but he's talking to himself because it's kind of Dark Knight Returns in that way, where he's like, I have to come back. Like, I have to be Daredevil again. And he's like, you guys are just feeding this fire that I've tried to snuff out for a year, and it's back. And you have like this really awesome, brutal, close shot, well choreographed fight scene where he beats the crap out of them and breaks bones, everything. And it ends that way. And it's like, that is what it was missing. Not the floaty CG, fast paced, not quite sure what's going on with the characters at the same time. It's very direct in what it wanted.
So I have 2 points on that note. First, that last scene that Jay is talking about in the second episode is part of the trailer. And I was initially kind of irritated because the trailer is all action. All action. And I think that now that I heard what you said at the beginning, it's because that's the direction they're going. Mm-hmm. But I thought it was a really bad bait and switch to throw in all of this really dark, you know, kind of almost gory to a certain point.
It felt just, the trailer felt just like the Netflix show.
And it's rated TVMA. So like it is very...
There's F-bombs and...
Yeah, and I mean, like, when he says, like, oh, I broke his arm, like, you see the break. And then, like, you see the blood and all of this stuff. So it was very much like, oh, this is going to be TVMA, and it's going to be like the Netflix show, or only even more dark. And,
hi, Sierra. Thank you. Thanks, Jared.
And then you kind of meld it together with the jokey, campy Daredevil that they were going for in these different scenes of him at the law firm, where he's like, oh, I'm going to go on a date with another new character that we've never met in the second season. So just because we introduced 4 new characters in the first 5 seconds of the first episode doesn't mean we won't throw a couple more your way in the second episode.
Right.
But yeah, so initially I was pretty irritated with that. Because it's like, how dare they? They know exactly what we want, and then they gave us this washed out lawyer version of a man that doesn't want to be Daredevil. And that is in the comics as well. Like, he's very broken. And so he goes all the time between, do I really want to be Daredevil? Is this right? Is this, like in the eyes of God, in the eyes of the law? Because he's a lawyer and a Catholic. And so, like, he's always kind of had that fight in him. So saying that, like, he was dropping the mask and he didn't want to be Daredevil anymore wasn't shocking.
Yeah. He quits being Daredevil like almost
all the
every
time.
issue in the comics. Yeah.
So that wasn't really the problem with it. It was just how the stark difference. And I think that in the first episode is the reason I was like, I wish that they would have just cut it, because they don't even, yes, these are the same characters, but it's like wearing a skin of characters that we love that are no longer there. And that's why it was really hard initially.
Well, and we, and it's weird because we want to see what we got out of the Netflix show. And I can tell the intention of this show is, and it's poorly done. That's the problem. But the intention of this show was, we want you to feel the way Matt feels, which is time has passed. It's been a year. You don't have your friends. You don't have your job that you once had. He still is. He's actually doing better. He's a lawyer. He's
no longer in Hell's Kitchen.
Yeah, he's out of Hell's Kitchen. He's not Daredevil. And they want the audience to be like, I miss this. Like, I don't like this. I miss what we came here to see. And they did it intentionally because they want you to feel that distance, and then how he will always go back to being where he was originally. And so I think we're seeing steps being taken to get closer and closer and closer back to the Netflix version, which there is someone that I have I follow on Twitter who's seen all of the episodes of the season, and he didn't spoil anything, but he said as you get further along into the season, it feels more and more like the Netflix series, and it has a better, they eventually kind of break past all of the stuff they had to fix, or the stuff that they had to kind of like work around, and it becomes more of a pure version of what they're looking for. And it's a little disappointing because essentially he's back to being where you kind of left off in season 3. So essentially you have like, what am I trying to say? Like he's
I think you're trying to say that this entire first season is going to be useless, and you can just start with season 2 when it comes out.
Well, yeah, because he said it in this way. He said it's Disney Plus trying to get rid of all of the things that Disney Plus did to get back to the Netflix series, essentially.
Without going, we spent too much money, scrap it.
And it took too much time.
Right. They're like, we're going to still come out with something, but it's not going to be good, and it's not going to be what you want. And that is so not the way to do something.
But
that's why I'm
so
irritated with it.
Like episodes 8 and 9 are really strong. Episode 7's pretty strong, but like it just kind of gradually gets you back. And they said, by the time you get to the end, you're excited for the next season, because whatever these new writers have done leads to it being more like what you're looking for.
Right.
And while that's disappointing, it's good to hear that I have hope in season 2. But I just wish it was a better version of getting there.
Yeah.
The other thing too is the thing about Daredevil, the Daredevil comic and the Daredevil series, is it's not all action oriented. The action's badass and awesome, and I love how overly violent and stuff it is. But it's Daredevil is at its core, it's guys talking to each other, and it's like. It's Matt in his own head talking about his own issues. It's him talking to Priest. It's him talking to Foggy. It's relationships. It's all that stuff. And so in the Netflix series, even the slow parts of that show are good, because that's the meat of that story. And so that show and the Netflix show was not all action. There are some full-on episodes there's no fighting. There are many episodes he's not even suited up as Daredevil, and they're great because every scene you're invested in what's happening, and you're invested. It still progresses the plot. It still has a lot of interesting things going on and a lot of good analogies and all that. And then in this show, that's the instant thing too, besides the CG that I instantly could tell the difference between real and CG, which a lot of people can. I could tell that just the writing wasn't as strong because you get those same scenes where that you should be invested in because they're slow and they're talking, and I didn't care and I got bored. And it's even worse when you know that there's a scene of Matt and Fisk, who have all this history from all these seasons, sitting in a diner, who know each other's identities and know exactly what they've done in the past, having a conversation about that because he's running for mayor, and Matt, and they're back kind of talking for the first time in years, and I didn't care. And the reason I didn't care is because I thought about it after the scene happened, and everything they talk about is important to the season, but you know nothing's going to happen because it's the first episode. So you have this first episode of them debating on this stuff, and there's no tension because the tension would be, well, they're going to get into a fight. Oh, well, it's going to lead to Fisk making a decision that ruins Matt's life, or vice versa. And they don't do anything because this just started. And so they have this conversation. They tell each other how they feel about each other, which you already know, and then they walk away and go their separate ways. And you're like, this is setting up what you're expecting to happen, but it's not going to happen now.
Right.
And that's when you get to the end of the episode where Fisk is won and he's the mayor and Matt's all upset, and you get some cool cinematography that kind of represents, like, Fisk is on top now, he's got the god light, and you got Matt down with the crowd, and he's like got a red flash on his face to show Daredevil's coming back and they're gonna fight, and you got this tension there. But yet again, it's not gonna happen yet, and you don't need the story then to show you like this is gonna happen. We know that we've known that for 3 seasons. I mean, their tension is palpable with those two in all 3 seasons, and you don't need to retell that. I mean, I'm sorry, if you're gonna go down the path of, we are restarting this show, we're going to still introduce it to new audiences, but we are going to give it the canon that it's from the first, it's technically a season 4, people called it that. You can't do both. You can't be like, well, it's a season 4, so you got to kind of already watch what's been there, but we're also going to take an entire half a season to kind of reintroduce you to what's what. I just don't think that's the best way to approach it, because then you get bad writing and you get something that no one wants to watch.
Well, you also get people that jump ship, because here's the thing: if I wasn't married to you, and all of your comic book knowledge, because you already have, you are already saying like, oh. And I'll let you say this a little bit later, but you're like, later in the season, I already know that what happened initially is not going to stand. And like, this is what's coming, and I can already see the writing on the wall. Someone that is not super into comics and doesn't know to like look at the numbers on the door, to look up the issues and stuff like that. When you don't know those Easter eggs, you just see a crappy remake of a Disney show that throws too much CGI into stuff. And an already failing Marvel cinematic universe.
Well, at this point, yeah, they're having issues recovering. And the thing that Marvel, the MCU, needs the most is difference in tones, which is what you got in the first few phases. You got every movie was a different, like you had a space opera, you had a superhero.
Space opera? What was that?
Have you ever heard what space opera means?
No.
It's like Guardians of the Galaxy. It's like it's a word for a lot of those kind of movies.
Just like in space.
It's in space, and it's epic and big, and there's a lot of adventure. But I got to teach Tricia these amateur things while we talk. But
amateur things. I'm sure there's someone in the comments section that doesn't know who that is. Is Matt the guy who walks away? Yes, Matt Murdock is Daredevil.
Yes.
See, I knew that.
But you had he had Guardians of the Galaxy, which is very different than Captain America Winter Soldier, which is very different from Iron Man, which is very different from Captain America 1, which is in the 40s. You got all these different tones. Everyone Thor was different. Everything felt different. And then eventually you got to a point where everything just has the same cinematic filter on it, the same kind of cheesy jokes, the same CG that's kind of rushed, the same, issues with those things, and everything feels samey as you go on. Captain America, the new one that came out, has that same issue as well, and you keep going and going and going, and it gets so stale. And Daredevil was one of those that had its own feel. It was very street level, and I remember when the first season came out, you sitting there watching, and you're going, I can't believe we're watching this, and somewhere in this universe there is a raccoon flying in space. Like, it's the same thing, but it's cool that you can have them all in that. And now every single one of them is turning into the same feel. So Daredevil now has that same Marvel feel.
The worst way.
Yeah, and I think these writers will come around, and I think they are going to give us kind of more what we're looking for. But right now, it's not. It's like Disney-fied it.
Did they, just because you've looked into this more, did they also get a new cinematographer? The only reason I ask is because even how the last scene was shot, it looked so good. And I know it was a reshoot, and so was that first episode that we didn't like.
Well, the thing that Marvel does, I don't know who did this stuff, but Marvel is going into the Marvel versus DC a little bit. DC, with their failures and with their new stuff going on, they have been a big proponent of creators are good at one thing, and it's whatever they're good at that made them good in their previous work, we are going to embrace for whatever it is they're making for us. So, Matt Reeves, who did the Batman, he did the Planet of the Apes movies, he did a lot of stuff like that. He's really good at like pretty tight scripts. He has a good team of cinematographers that work, that make his stuff always look good. He knows who he works with, that he collaborates with, that makes it look the best, the best version it can be. So the DC's like, whatever you're doing, Todd Phillips, you're doing Joker. This is what you want to do. We embrace it. It may be, it may work, it may not. But it's what you creatively feel like. Marvel, they play it very safe, where they hire a lot of directors who aren't really renowned for something. They are directors that you probably haven't heard of, that fit in the tight budgets that they have and are able to make something just kind of work.
Okay, that's another thing. Disney is so cheap, and it just annoys me so much because of they're almost a monopoly at this point, and then they're like, we just don't have the budget for that, and it drives me nuts.
Well, yeah, and so that's where you got James Gunn now, who one of the most stylistically impressive movies in the Marvel universe is the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and that's why you can watch any of the stuff in Phase 5 or whatever they're in now, Phase 4, and out of that phase, it's obvious that the one that looks the best and is the prettiest and has the best CG and just feels the best and has its own unique style is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And that is because James Gunn is a director's director. He's the one that he cares about what he's doing, and he doesn't ever do crunch for CG artists. He wants to get his stuff done under budget, on time, and give them the extra time they need to get everything to work well. And it was a big fumble for Marvel to lose him, and it's a great win for DC to get him to do Superman and to lead their universe, because now they're embracing whoever we get to direct this. We are embracing what they do, but instead of like the DCEU where they just are like, do what you want. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, we took a risk with it and it was fine. He goes, do what you do and make it exactly how you want to make it and use your stylistic choices. However, we are not approving the script until we feel good about it. Multiple committees look through it and go, this feels strong. This feels like it's worth making. Now go do your thing. And we're not going to pressure you in any other direction through that. The directors at Marvel now, they come in and they're like, I directed a few episodes of this, or I directed a movie that it didn't really make a lot of money, but it was under budget. And they bring them in and they go, well, you direct this. We have a writer who's already on it. You just direct what we give you. And if we don't like what we see, we're going to tell you what to add or what to remove from it. And you see it in the new Captain America. You see it in the new Daredevil. You see it in a lot of the recent Marvel movies that have come out. So you see it here in that sense. And I think that's why when it comes to like a cinematographer, it could be an amazing cinematographer. It could be someone who did some of the best movies you've ever seen, but they probably, didn't have the right director to give them the right information or to give them the right context. Or they shot it with this intention of this is the style we're going for, and then Marvel threw a filter over it.
Right.
Like that. So you start to see it with that second episode, like you're talking about that fight. I think that's where these writers, they're like, look, we're screwing this up. And Kevin Feige's like, look, we're screwing this up. We need to get some guys in here who care more about this. And we're not going to let you, it's not Feige's call, I don't think, but like, we're not going to let you like completely redo it, but do what you can to fix this one up. And then you guys will get free control the next season. And that's where you're seeing that disjointed nature.
And Feige's the new CEO?
No, Kevin Feige is the executive producer of the Marvel.
Okay.
Of Marvel Studios. Disney should put Gore Verbinski back to work. He seemed to have his shit together. Yes. I agree. Sometimes it feels like they're focusing on quantity instead of quality. Yes. And that's kind of what they've talked about too, is if you look at like the Fantastic Four trailer, it's looking a little more promising because it has style. Will the writing be good? We don't know. Will the acting be good? We don't know. Will the CG be good? We don't know. But it has its own distinct style, this retro futuristic 1960s. Apparently from behind the scenes, what they've been saying is that it's a lot of reconstructing, and there's a lot of these movies that have already been pretty much made and coming out the pipeline, and TV shows. And they're just getting them out as best as they can. And there's kind of this shift that they're going to go into with Marvel where things are going to start feeling a little better. Will that happen? We don't know yet. But that's the thoughts people have with Daredevil. It's the thoughts people have with like Fantastic Four. And that's what happened with DC as well, where you had the DCEU and it was done. James Gunn was taking over. He was going to reboot the universe. And now we're getting Superman, which is going to kind of kick off this new universe of things with different style, a different feel, different efforts. But they came out with Aquaman 2, Shazam 2, Black Adam, like all these. And people go, well, what's James Gunn doing? This is just as bad. Well, he really Flash, like he didn't really direct them or take control over them. He just kind of helped maybe give some opinions here and there, but they were pretty much like 98% done when he got in there, and they just had to get them out because they couldn't just not come out with them. They spent millions upon millions of dollars to do this.
Millions.
I was thinking of
Yeah.
but yeah, that's kind of what's been going on with that. Rant over.
No, you're good. Actually, I'm going to start you on a new rant. So my question for you, because we are over an hour now, just talking about this, these two episodes. And so all in all, I want two things from you. Tell me, are you still hopeful for the rest of the series, of the Disney series? And then, do you have anything that you want to share that is like your assumptions or your predictions for how the rest of this season's going to go?
Yeah. So I have hope for this season. I think we're going to see more of what we want to see. I do think there's going to be weird throughout the entire season. I think we're going to just like, it's going to be like, oh, this episode now, like 90% of it was awesome. I loved it. And then there's going to be one thing like, what the heck? Like whether it's a whole episode or whether it's a scene where they're going to come in and you're going to be like, that was weird. You can tell that they had issues with that. But I have hope for it, especially because I love Daredevil. And I think if you have Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio still backing it up, I think that they can bring a lot to help, especially with the new writers who seem like, when you see the glimmers of what we've seen, I think there will be more with that too. And I'm excited for season 2, quote unquote, which is really just part 2 of season 4, or season 1, or whatever you want to call it. But I do have hope for that. With theories, a lot of people are really upset about Foggy dying
Immediately.
And it's so funny. Like, I don't mean to sound like back in my day, or I'm an old man, I know more than you. But I don't know how many times I have, since being a comic book fan, before a lot of these movies or TV shows were being made and it was just the comics, I don't know how many times people were absolutely 100% convinced that a character is dead for good. And, like, you've seen Superman die 15 times. You've seen, all these characters. Alfred's come and gone. In the comics, Foggy has died like 3 or 4 different times, sometimes legitimately, and sometimes he's faked his death. And people go, well, no, this one's different because it's different because this is so grounded, and they wouldn't do that. Like, Matt heard his heartbeat, so this is definitively
This is so grounded. The CGI had him like flying.
And it's like, dude, like, it's cute. Like, I guarantee it's usually people on TikTok that I'm seeing who are like, no, he's dead for good. He's dead for good. And it's like, you're probably 16, and I'm not criticizing you for that, but it's like, I remember when I started like really watching those shows or reading comic books and being like, wow, they really are dead. I wonder, Batman died. Are they going to bring him back? No, they're going to keep him dead forever and just completely get rid of that franchise because of a story choice. Like, no, he's coming back. So Foggy is going to come back.
I don't know. They killed off, so not to get into Supernatural, but they killed off Dean and Sam probably 6 different times. But at the end, one of them is really dead, like for good. So maybe this will be the time.
It's not comic books. And they're going to bring Dean back in like a revival. But
I hope so. Maybe with more scars.
Jesus. More scars. He looks even more muscles.
Oh, all right.
Rarely are comic book characters ever actually dead forever. Yes, that is correct. And even if they are dead forever, quote unquote, it's like 20 years at max. And even
Then we're in a new universe.
They got to dig back into that pot, man, because we have like 100-year-old characters at this point, and you can't kill them forever. But Foggy's coming back, and I'm counting on him coming back. And you can give me crap if that's not true. You can sit here and you can comment on every video I post or every single thing I comment on and say you were wrong, and I will take that if that's the case, and I'll go, you are, wow. They surprised me with that. He's coming back. I don't know if he's going to be in a witness protection thing. I don't know if they're going to do what they did with Nick Fury and Winter Soldier, where they stopped his heart for 1 beat per minute when he was he was absolutely dead. I don't know if it's going to be a different universe version of Foggy. That'd be stupid, but something like that is going to happen.
But you're like, he's in your mind 100%.
And that's not me saying he's coming back at the end of this season. That's not me saying he's coming back at the end of season 2. He's coming back. He will be back. And the only way he will not be back is if they cancel the show before they finish the story they want to tell. There's no way they're keeping him dead. It's part of the arc. There's already people that, and I thought this before I saw this, but I guess people noticed that Nelson, Murdoch, and Page, their address was a comic book issue from, I think it was the Brubaker run, where Foggy fakes his death. And those are never a coincidence in movies. You can look at any license plate in a superhero movie and it's going to reference a comic book issue. So
that's
I would
specifically for like you,
exactly
for nerds like
exactly.
you. I love that.
It just is what it is. It happened with that Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League video game, where the Suicide Squad in the game kill the Justice League, and then they come out with like 4 chapters of DLC, and I'm like, by the end of this DLC, all the Justice League will be back. What happened a year later? All the Justice League came back, and everyone went, but they said it's called Suicide Squad Killed the Justice League. They should have been dead. Please. Like, really? Like, you really think that's how that works? Like, if you're going to be a comic book fan, you have to understand that there's corniness that you cannot escape. And the corniness of comic book media in general is no one is dead forever. The only time they're dead forever is if you have a very specific take that only lasts a short amount of time, or your shit gets canceled. So,
speaking of characters that just won't die, Karen Page, she's supposed to, for all of you that don't know, in the Born Again comic,
Guardian Devil.
Okay. Karen Page dies. Like, she is in the final season of the Netflix series, when they're in the church, they kill the priest in that church. In the comic, Karen Page is the one that's supposed to die. And they were like, no, she's so good at this. We're going to keep her around. And so they did, and they pivoted at the last minute, and they killed the priest instead. So Karen is still not dead, still in this series. Thank God. And she is still here, but because of those rewrites, she was never supposed to be in the original. Like Jay said, she was supposed to die off screen. But nope, they were like, we're going to keep her around. And so she goes off to San Francisco again in like the first, I guess this would be like minute 8 of the first episode. They're like, Karen Page left after that flashback a flash forward. Karen comes back very briefly for Bullseye's hearing, where Matt is testifying that justice will not be served because he never gets his friend Foggy back. And Karen comes in the door at the last minute just to kind of be there to support for Foggy. And they're like, they have this really really icy conversation about how San Francisco's really good, and sorry I haven't called or answered your calls. Take care of yourself. I'm going back to California. And so what do you think about the history of Karen Page? I'm just saying right now, she's not going to be gone for good because she needs to be, but she's not going to be gone for good. What do you think the return of Karen Page is going to be like? And do you think it will be by the end of this season?
Like, do you think, like, not death wise, like just how she's going to be back in Hell's Kitchen or back in I think she's just going to be drugged back in through Daredevil. I just think it's the same thing. I called it the Dark Knight Returns thing because the whole point of that book is, Bruce Wayne is like 50 years old and he comes back and he cannot not be Batman. Like he tries, he'll do everything he can. He will always be Batman. He will come back and he will always, it doesn't matter if he's doing it from a wheelchair. He's going to always be fighting as Batman. Daredevil's the same way. Can you imagine? Daredevil loves it too much, and he admits that. He loves being Daredevil, and he loves the feel of beating the crap out of people. And he will not stop. And that's his contradiction, and that's his
every
curse.
Christian does. Every good Catholic boy loves.
And so I think the kind of the running thing with a lot of superheroes is the longer they're around, the more history repeats itself and the more you run into these things. So if he's going to continue to be Daredevil, Karen is going to continue to follow that. She can't get enough of that either. And she can't get enough. And now that she knows that Matt Murdock is Daredevil, she's going to continue to be there when that happens. And I think it's going to bring her into the mystery and bring her back. It's like when Ben Urich is like, in the first season is like, I'm done being the journalist that like gets the scoop and like gets into trouble for all the stuff I do. And he gets drugged back into it because it's what he does. He's a journalist. It's the same idea. And so I think Karen's just going to come back that way. And I wonder if, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe she's the first one to kind of find out Foggy may be still alive. Like she's the one that kind of plays the journalist role. It would probably be her who realizes something isn't adding up.
You are so right. That's exactly what's going to happen.
And she's going to try to convince Matt, and Matt's going to probably fly further off the deep end as Daredevil. And there are arcs where Daredevil's a villain. I mean, there are times where he completely falls off the deep end and he's a bad guy. So, you know, we'll see what happens. I mean, it could be something new, something different.
Sierra says, think of all of the new gadgets wheelchair Batman could bring.
Yeah, his bat wheelchair. But he would.
It's like rockets on the back
he's
of
like,
it.
Justice, and he just flies away in his wheelchair.
No, he's like, justice.
Well, I mean, they do that too in like Kingdom Come and stuff. Like Batman is like an old man, and he's been beaten up so much, his body is literally broken, and he lives in an exosuit to continue to be Batman, and the suit is what keeps him going. Like he's like a robot.
Yeah, you don't need wheelchairs when you have money.
Yeah, so. Could that happen this season? A villain? It could. I actually wouldn't be surprised if they went down the Shadowland arc. I won't. I would say probably not, only because of the writers' issues they've already been having. I don't think they had that intention, and I don't think they could bring that all in, even in the second quote unquote season, which is just the other half. I think it'll be more of a. I'm thinking it's more of a Chip Zdarsky run kind of deal, where if you haven't read that, the whole arc is him essentially finding out that he killed someone, and then it's him dealing with, because he doesn't kill, and him dealing with how does he bring justice upon himself and how is it satisfying for him. And it's still, he kind of cheats the system and how he gets out of that whole thing. But he I think I think it'll be more like that, where it's like he's close to crossing a line and he's going to kind of repent for his sins kind of thing. Yeah.
Is season 2 already filmed?
Season 2 is filming like right now. It's like starting production. I think starts in like this week or next week. Like it's really close.
So they do have time to pivot based on the reaction of season 1.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I think that they can. I think they will. I think they will look at a little bit of the responses, and I think you'll see tighter CG. I think you'll see a little bit more. I think they're going to try even harder at the feel of the Netflix series and lean into that more. Hollywood's a reactive business.
Right.
You know, you can take Superman and go, we're going to try something different and make him darker and make his movies a little more darker. He's a little more burdened. And we're not going to do the comic book costume thing. No tights. We're going to put him in black leather because that's cooler. And then, you know, here we are 20 years later, and they're going as accurate as they can be with costumes. That's why you got a Daredevil suit that is like maroon in the Netflix series. And in this series, it's just more and more becoming the comic book. It's lighter. You know, you see that all the time. So they do that with story too, where they're going to go, you know, maybe we shouldn't have just been like, no, we're not doing any of that. We're going to do what we want to do because we think we're more creative. Yeah. Whoa.
Why is it?
It's like ringing at us. Got to fill the puzzle.
Weird. That was weird.
But yeah, that was basically them telling us that our live is almost over, which it is almost over.
Right.
We're going to wrap up here shortly. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I know it's kind of different.
So the other thing is, if you're wondering why we're doing this over on TikTok, it's because we had initially planned on doing this live Wednesday night on YouTube. And then YouTube is still not granting Jay access to go live. So we just took it into our own hands and we're like, we're going to do it on TikTok, repost it on
the YouTube page.
On the YouTube page.
The podcast.
So,
and we may even try to get it on like Spotify if we can just do the audio.
yeah, I'm sure we can.
Yeah.
So this is going to be live at least on YouTube, probably also as kind of a next bonus episode of the podcast.
I think we should keep it to TikTok. The lives. I love doing it on TikTok. I think it was smooth. I love talking to people. I think it's all working. I think it's working really well. I think what we're going to start doing for the future is this isn't going to continue. We're going to have a regular podcast too with audio and stuff, and it's not going to be live, but these lives are going to be on TikTok. We'll upload them later on YouTube for you guys to enjoy as well. And we'll also upload them to the other podcast stuff.
You're getting some good reactions here. Said, very much enjoyed. Nighthawk says, I like this. And Jared said, rest in peace, Gene Hackman.
Yeah.
We were just talking about that in the car and how sad that whole situation was.
Yeah.
Just like, I know, those are the
He's
stories.
a good actor too.
Yeah.
But yeah, in any event, I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we're gonna. I would say, do you want to try to do another one of these on Tuesday after we watch the new episode?
So I was thinking we could do it one of two ways, and it's completely up to you because it's your show. Do you want to record them, our thoughts afterwards, or do we want to do like a live as we're watching it and kind of do it that way? The one caveat I have is if we do the latter, we have no idea what's coming, and we know that the series is MA. So if it's TV MA and we're committing to doing this on TikTok, you might get flagged.
I think we should do reactions after.
Okay.
I think what would be really fun is what we'll do is if you guys, anybody who knows, we'll promote it too. When the new episode comes out on Tuesday, guys, catch up. And if you guys want to, we'll schedule the live afterwards. It may not be on that night if it's late, but it may, because they come out at like 6 o'clock here. So we could do them then, or if we don't, we could do them the next day. We'll put them in the schedule and you guys watch it, and then we can all reconvene and discuss it together. Because I love talking in the chat too about it. Like I love having people interact with and give their opinions on stuff. So, and we can do that with other stuff too when Daredevil's done if we want to. And we can just be like, watch this, and then we're going to discuss it in the next live. So that's kind of the plan, I think. And then stay tuned. I mean, we're still going to be doing real podcasts too that are like recorded, and we're going to have some edited ones in the future too, but I'm going to have more guests and stuff. So follow the YouTube page, follow on Spotify or iTunes or wherever you listen to stuff like a podcast, and listen to the other episodes if you haven't heard them too, because we have a couple up there. I'm excited to get back into it. I really like this format, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, good. TikTok's so great. TikTok is just amazing. Their version of OBS is very streamlined and easy to use. I thought this was a really easy setup. It was actually so easy to set up that we were like, this is going too well. Something's wrong. There's no way that it's going to go this smoothly. So first time using TikTok Live Studio, I think it's great.
And you're going live in like 2 hours.
I sure am. I'll have to charge my phone up.
Yeah, so Tricia will sing too, and you can promote me.
Oh, all right. Well, all right.
But if you guys haven't watched the new Daredevil or the old season on Netflix, it's also on Disney+. They moved it over there. So watch that if you haven't, because it's great. And then if you have seen those, watch Born Again, whether you like it or not. And I would love to hear your opinions next time we convene about what you thought of either of these episodes or the new one that comes out on Tuesday. So Tuesday.
Millions and millions.
All right. Well, that was our thoughts on the first 2 episodes of Daredevil Born Again from the Stranded J podcast. What's the jingle, Tricia?
Stranded J podcast.
Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for joining in. Thank you for all the support too. All of this stuff's going to go towards making this even better. I'm looking to get, better light, some stuff like that. So, all that will help us to making this even more smooth. So thanks so much for the support, and we will talk to you guys in the next one next week. Thanks.